And so I think it's important that those folks that are most impacted, oftentimes most negatively impacted, those that are getting, in many ways, the brunt of the situation, have a part or say in the solution, a solution that is going to actually get to the root of the problem and not just what I used to say all the time, duct tape the issue. But again, it's not just about the numbers, but it's about the awareness. It's about the culture change that occurred within the 4 years that made an impact in a way that I think we had never really seen before in terms of moving the environmental justice work, particularly in the federal government, but also making sure that we were providing, again, the resources and the pathway for organizations to also benefit.
Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Equal Planet. My name is Durga Srinivasan.
And my name is Kai Tran.
And we are here today to introduce today's guest. She is the former Federal Chief Environmental Justice Officer of the Biden administration's Council on Environmental Quality. Her name is Dr. Jalonne White-Newsomme, and she came to Duke for Kai's event, which led us to have the conversation you're going to hear today. So Kai, tell us a little bit about that, how it came about.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So my introduction to Dr. J is a bit of a windy story. Before moving out here to Durham, North Carolina, I was out on the central coast of California advocating and helping support a campaign for the first ever indigenously led and nominated National Marine Sanctuary, which as of this last fall of 2024 has been established, the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary, which was super exciting.
Ooh.
And since then, I was recognized for my efforts to advocate and support the sanctuary during last year's Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month through an appearance on a climate leadership panel with the Council on Environmental Quality. And through those connections I made with folks at CEQ, I was able to get in touch with Dr. J. And I had been super inspired by the work that not only her, but the administration had been able to accomplish to progress environmental justice. And I'm a firm believer that the Biden-Harris administration have done the most to advance environmental justice and support communities impacted by environmental harms and pollution. Whether that be the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council or the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool or Justice 40, which I know you all talked about, which directly allocated millions of dollars from various bills to communities impacted by environmental injustices. In the interactions that I've had with Dr. J, I found her to be incredibly personable, really tough on issues that are important, but also bringing a very calming presence to those conversations. It's super inspiring, and I really view her as a generational leader in the environmental justice movement. So I'm super happy that you had the chance to talk with her, and I'm excited for you all to hear about the conversation that Durga had with Dr. J.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kai, and
you.
for letting that happen and making it happen. And thank you all for being there, and you will hear a lot of what Kai talked about. There will be more resources in the show notes. And you'll also hear about some of Dr. J's tips on how we can be resilient in the dark age of this new administration. Thank you and enjoy. Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much for being here with me. My name is Durga, and we are here with Dr. Jalonne L. White-Newsomme. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself and give some context, that would be awesome.
Yes, well, thank you so much, Durga, for inviting me to this conversation. And I tell you, it is a pleasure to be here, not only as we acknowledge Earth Month, but also really the, Black Women's Month. And so just thank you for, kind of spurring this conversation about really, really important issues. I have had so many opportunities over my lifetime, but most recently, I had the opportunity to serve in the Biden-Harris administration as the first federal chief environmental justice officer. And what that means is I had to execute on the president's agenda to try and make sure that the federal government all of our agencies and the White House advanced protections, policies, and got resources to Black and Brown and Indigenous communities and low income communities across the United States that have unfortunately suffered from pollution, suffered from health concerns, suffered from industry literally contaminating the places that they live, work, play, and pray. And so that was really a role that, again, an honor and privilege to be in that space. But now I'm back at home outside of Detroit, Michigan, and I relaunched my consulting practice, Empowering a Green Environment and Economy. And I'm big around names, and that is so important, not only the name of my business, but really what that means. And so I see this tension over my career between us having a good economy and protecting our environment. And to me, it really shouldn't be a tension because we should and can do both. And so, really, the role of empowering a green environment and economy is to make that connection, to make it easy to try and solve the problems across many different sectors that people think are unsolvable. And so, as an engineer, a trained engineer, and someone who has a passion for people and making sure that folks have voices that have been, in many ways, ignored or invisible, that's just a couple of the values that I bring to my work and practice in trying to, again, make sure that our economy and our environment are able to work together, but transforming it in a way where communities' voices are always first.
1000%. And that's something you have championed since day one. And how can you contextualize that for people? And why is elevating the voices of the most underserved, why is that equity side of the climate conversation important?
Well, I think if you, which I try not to do too much, turn on the news, uh, over the past couple months, we see intentional efforts to quiet, to really disable different voices from being heard. And I think it's a shame. And so, even before, again, the current federal administration was in power, we've had certain communities that were not really deemed to be valuable to the conversation, whether it was around the economy, whether it was around, what are the policies that are needed. Oftentimes, we've had leaders at the local and state level feel like they have the answers, but they don't actually talk to the people that are being impacted by whatever solutions that you come up with. And so that has been unfortunately kind of the way things have worked for decades. And I think the reason why that we are in this situation now where we have people that are living in communities where they are literally, it's not only hazardous to their health, but they are sick in their homes, in their communities because of the pollution, whether it be by air or water, that has been allowed to, make their places unsafe. And so I think it's important that those folks that are most impacted, oftentimes most negatively impacted, those that are getting, in many ways, the brunt of the situation, have a part or say in the solution, a solution that is going to actually get to the root of the problem and not just what I used to say all the time, duct tape the issue. And so we need to, again, get to this point where we value everybody's voice. And it's not just because you have some highfalutin position. It's not based on how much money you make or how many people you know, but it's really based on the wisdom that you carry within you, being a part, a member, someone that lives in that community, and really valuing not just academic knowledge, but actually experiential knowledge. So I think about when I was working on my dissertation in Detroit, and really the goal was to support our health department because many people were dying from extreme heat, just hot temperatures, living in their homes, living in high-rise apartments, and these were mostly low-income elderly people, Black and brown, and they didn't have the resources to figure out why. But they were trying to get data, and really the data wasn't there because nobody was collecting it. So part of my work was to try and give voice to those elders, those seniors that were living in these places that were really, really hot, that were suffering, to say, hey, what are the things, what are the solutions, the easy, low hanging fruit, also the policy solutions that we need to activate. And so every week for like a couple of months during the summer, I sat in the homes of many senior citizens in Detroit and just talked to them like, what are you doing to stay cool? What would you need to feel safer in your home when you're trying to get to the store, get to the library and it's too hot outside? Like just basic things, that wisdom that they share with me, I was in able to not only put in a paper for publication, but take it to the Detroit City Council and start an extreme heat task force that again tried to figure out what are the policy solutions, what do we need, what agencies do we need involved to protect some of our most our folks that are made vulnerable by, again, the way they live, where they live in our environment. So again, that's just again one example where those voices of folks that are the most impacted really can change life in a way for so many different people. We just have to listen. So Bernice and Mustafa, from the bottom of my heart,
That's like the
thank you.
depth of
Thank you
knowledge.
for
You
bringing
didn't
that
just
into
come
this room,
and
into this
and
space.
have these
Couldn't have done it
ideals.
better.
No, you have done the work to
Still
build
trying to
that
digest
portfolio,
that.
understand
So,
why
all right.
these tactics, these
Again,
strategies
Carletta
actually
and
are better
children,
for all
Mustafa, Bernice,
people
thank you
if we
for helping to
prioritize the
set
most
this
vulnerable.
tone.
And you're
For the
talking about
first time in
papers
history,
too.
we
And
have a
now we've
president
seen
and vice
how
president. And I'm going to
what's
say that
going
again.
on
For the
from
first
higher
time in
power
history,
is that a lot of the words that we use in academia, that we use to prioritize people, even the word vulnerable, is being quote unquote
we have a
banned.
president and a vice
And this is
president
being put
who
out
have
by the
made
Wall Street
environmental
Journal and
justice
New
a
York
pillar in
Times. They're
this
all saying
administration.
that equity is being
Thank
banned.
you.
Race, Black, Latinx, women. And that's really jarring as a student. So
Because we can't take that for granted.
what can we do? Like as someone who that's my thesis, like that is my thesis right there, is all those words. How can
No,
we
I
how
start
can we move forward, and what
3 to 8
actual
p.m.
power
every day.
does that have as someone who's been in those spaces?
Yes.
I mean, words are so powerful, right? And for most of my life, I've been pretty transparent and not scared to say whatever I need to say in whatever venue. And I think it's important that we acknowledge in every situation who is being impacted, why they're being impacted, and what the reasons are. And if it's Black and brown people, if it's low income people, if it's poor white people, if it's indigenous people, like we have to be real. And that's very important, particularly not only in academia, but just in the policy space. But I mean, as you said, we are we are in a very special situation right now. And there are many institutions, whether you think about Harvard, whether you think about um, our federal agencies, whether you think about our community-based organizations, all these different institutions and entities have been under attack since January 20th, 2025. And they are specifically being attacked um, to, I would say, scare people into not using the words that I think accurately describe the work that you and others are trying to do, advancing equity, trying to, uplift environmental justice, trying to make sure that our communities are diverse and inclusive. And, while that is very frustrating, I am of the belief that this is merely a season, a season that we have to get through. So what I have told, and I will continue to say, and some people might disagree, which is fine, is that, whether you're an academic institution, a community-based organization, a federal agency, nonprofit, you have to do what you have to do to survive. And if that means changing a word, changing the title, changing the description of what you're doing for this season that we're in, then you need to do that. Because on the other end, what's most important for me is the work that's done. It's not how you talk about it. So, for example, if I was running a nonprofit and, a grant to pay my staff to do the outreach and education was contingent on me changing the name of that grant from, climate equity and justice to something else that doesn't have climate and equity and justice in it, I'm going to change it and find some way to, again, make it palatable to the powers that be, because ultimately the goal is to get the money to do the work. So just changing the language, and I can still do the work, upholding those same values of justice and equity and diversity, then why not? So again, I know that it is different situations and different circumstances for different institutions, and I encourage folks to go with their heart and what they think they have the guts to do. But what I have been encouraging people is to do what you need to do to survive, particularly community-based organizations and others. But if you are an organization or an entity, i.e., someone working in philanthropy or a foundation that is not impacted by, the rhetoric of this current federal government and White House, then shame on you if you back down. Shame on you if you change anything. Shame on you if you discontinue your support and funding for organizations that are doing the work. So again, it depends on where you're coming from and what your situation is. And I don't shame or fault or judge anybody, because you got to go with your comfort. But I feel like the work is more important than the words during this season.
That was
internationally.
so well
So just give
said.
yourselves a
And I
hand
think
for
that was
being
helpful to
here
contextualize
and the
it,
work
because
that you do.
there are philanthropies where it's one major donor,
I want to
and
start off
that
by
donor
acknowledging
has
again the
say
original
in
caretakers of
words.
this
It's
land,
not
the
just the
Duwamish
orange dude in the
peoples.
White
Again,
House.
just a
But then there's
reminder
people
that
who
it is
have
our
to apply
job
for
to take care of
grants.
Mother
And
Nature,
you're doing
but
that, but you
also
also want
take
to do
care
the
of the
work
people
behind it.
that inhabit this
That's
earth.
when you have to
And again, I
maybe
am just so
it's
grateful.
like just a shift. It's
So
just a
again, my
tweak
name
is
is
what
Dr. Jalonne
I'm hearing.
White-Newsomme.
Is
People
it's
call me
not
Dr.
really
J for
just,
short because they
it's
usually
not
don't know how to
changing what you're
pronounce
actually
my
doing,
first name, so I'm not offended
which is
by that.
important.
And I
And
have the honor
I definitely want to talk about the policies that you got to be a part of
and
in the
privilege of
administration.
serving as
What
the
were some of your
first federal
favorite
chief
policies, and what
environmental
were some of
justice
those
officer for
outcomes?
the White House.
I mean, it's interesting because, Durga, I've been working on environmental justice for a while. And I was, just as you're saying that, uh, my first entree into the policy realm was working with a group of activists and advocates in the state of Michigan to try and create the first environmental justice executive order for the state of Michigan. And it didn't happen, but I think the process, the kind of sketching out language, the, kind of collaboration and camaraderie was amazing. And I think laid a great foundation for other things that were to come out of the state of Michigan. But as I think about over time, some of the other things that I've been involved in terms of environmental justice policy before I got to the White House, I would say I'm really proud of the work that we did on the EPA's Clean Power Plan back in probably 2016. Basically, it was a rule that was going to regulate emissions from power plants. I was at We Act for Environmental Justice at that time, serving as their first director of federal policy in the DC office. And I had the opportunity to help coordinate the efforts of over 50 environmental justice organizations to create a solid policy platform as to what we wanted to see, what we wanted the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, to put in this clean power plan. Because it wasn't enough just to say, we want to reduce emissions. How were you going to reduce emissions? Where were you going to reduce emissions? And who was going to benefit? And so we were really, I would say it was a win because we were able to get the Environmental Protection Agency to require an environmental justice analysis where they were going to do reductions, to actually have the words environmental justice in the actual final regulation. And so that was amazing. And probably I would say I considered a victory, not only because we were able to get that verbiage into this rule, even though the Clean Power Plan didn't pass, but we raised an awareness across the agencies. We were able to come together across these different organizations, working in many different parts of the country, and it was amazing. So when I think about, you know, those things that led up to the work when I was at the White House, leading our Office of Environmental Justice within the Council of Environmental Quality, which is um, a policy council within the White House and executive office. Uh, Again, this like opportunity to build awareness and work and policy at the highest level, which we've never had an Office of Environmental Justice in the White House before. So the fact that we were even there was something that I was proud to be a part of. But that we had at that time, again, in Biden and Harris, we had folks that realized that environmental justice was important. And having that cover, having that push from the top made it easier for us to work with our federal agency partners like the Department of Energy, Department of Education, Health and Human Services, to make sure that that message and that work and that policy was really pushed out through the agencies, which the federal agencies are the ones that really do the hard work. And so when I think about what I'm most proud of is the fact that we, again, built this awareness around the White House that I don't think was there before. We forced people within our different policy councils, from the Domestic Policy Council to others, to ask the question about environmental justice before you just come up with some policy and try and implement it. We were definitely successful in reaching, again, one of the president's goals around the Justice 40 initiative, which was essentially making sure that 40% of all the resources that were coming from the federal government, grants, technical assistance, et cetera, went to communities that had been overburdened with pollution and low income. And we were able to exceed that 40% goal. But again, it's not just about the numbers, but it's about the awareness. It's about the culture change that occurred within the 4 years that made an impact in a way that I think we had never really seen before in terms of moving the environmental justice work, particularly in the federal government, but also making sure that we were providing, again, the resources and the pathway for organizations to also benefit. So really proud of, again, the Biden-Harris administration, what it allowed us to do. Would have loved to have had more time because it was so much more to do, but that's not the case. So, yeah.
That Justice 40 is something that's known throughout America now. It's not just like in the niche environmental space. And it's you had an impact in that, like you played a role in making that happen. Where does it stand now?
Well, I mean, we were able to get a decent amount of the funds out. And when I say we, our federal agencies. So, again, Congress gave us money, appropriated money through the Inflation Reduction Act and a couple of other big laws. That money, of course, was distributed to agencies to support different programs, grant programs, on climate and whatever. And agencies, all of our federal agency partners worked really hard to get that money out as soon as possible. And they were working literally up until the end of the previous administration to get that money out, to deploy it as much as possible. So you are already, and we will probably continue to see the impacts of the Justice 40 initiative because of the seeds that were planted and the money that had, again, already made it through the government's doors. Unfortunately, there is money that is still, I think, frozen, meaning the federal government, the current federal government, is holding on to it and not allowing organizations that again had contracts that were approved and basically said, yes, the money is coming for you to do this work. That money, a lot of money has been frozen. I don't have a specific dollar amount, but it is a lot, again, of community-based organizations, EJ organizations that have really had to reassess their survival because they were expecting uh, this money to come from, again, agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency and others that have these huge grant programs that Congress gave us the money to do. So that's where things stand. And again, what I'm really proud of is that there are nonprofits and organizations and lawyers that are really, that have been not only convening, but providing legal support and advice, um, and kind of raising up this, again, this atrocity that this current federal government has caused, but trying to fight to make sure that folks are able to get access to these funds at some point. So it is really, it's beautiful, even when we're all in this ridiculous struggle. Oftentimes people come together to fight together. And that is what I've been witnessing over the past couple of months. And I doubt that it's gonna stop because I feel like we will be in a fight for these next 4 years.
Yeah, and I think you're someone who's never really stopped. It's like January 20th was just a few months ago when you moved
Yeah.
back to Michigan from the White House. And
Mhm.
you keep pushing. And what kind of principles are guiding you right now in this fight that we're all coming together for? What can we be thinking about?
I mean, where my head is now is, I'm not really spending as much time focused on the ridiculousness that's happening at the federal level. I mean, I'm staying connected to be a resource to people, to connect with media when they want another say or another opinion, um, to continue to support my folks within the agencies and community-based organizations in any way. So that is kind of a sphere that it takes up some of my time, but it's not my total focus right now. I think what's most important for me, just in the space that I am, is to really focus locally and at the state level. Um, I've had the opportunity to get involved with some local political organizations over the past couple months. I'm going to be hopefully pursuing some leadership opportunities at the local and state level, whether it be the local zoning board or, the local kind of political club, some leadership positions there, because, I think while the federal government is just making a mess of everything, when you talk about environmental justice, it is really a local issue, right? So while I don't have control over this stuff, I can use some influence, provide some support and some leadership to really help move local issues in a way that hold on to these values of justice and equity and protection and health, that have guided my work all my life, but guided my work in the White House and even now. So I really encourage folks at this moment, those that are not, again, in the federal government or in federal agencies, to really think about what can I do in my backyard, literally, to make sure that, the values, the morals, the things that, I don't know, most people care about, aren't dissipated, because there is a really powerful movement at the local level that is going to be needed now and for these next 4 years to even try and maintain, you know, the services, the protection, the enforcement, you know, all these things that really can make or break a person's physical environment, their health. So that is where my focus will be. That is where I'm encouraging folks to kind of use their energy, because at this point, I think we have to move from the grieving period, in this period of, oh my God, I don't know what happened, to, okay, what actions are we taking? And while we can't, in my humble opinion, rely on the federal government in a lot of the ways that we have before, again, in the previous 4 years with the Biden-Harris administration, this is an opportunity for us to bring in new partners in a different way. And so my work through my company is really focused on how do we build that case for corporate America and foundations and state and local government to play a bigger role in advancing environmental justice, regardless of what's going on at the federal level. So that is where my focus and energy, and I'm really excited about the potential, despite, again, all the craziness that's happening.
It's
Yeah,
Dr.
it sounds
Jalonne
like you're
White-Newsomme,
creating like
and I
this
am Senior
an
Director
armor of
for
values to
Environmental Justice
protect
at the White House
against like the
Council on
arrows that are
Environmental
coming in
Quality. We
from the
are
White
so
House
glad
now,
that
from
you
the
were
new
able
one.
to join us
I
today
Um,
like
under
that.
short notice,
yeah.
but we are
I'm
excited
like,
to
that should be our
announce
little logo, like a
and
little
the
armor.
release
Right.
of our version
Imagining that.
1.0.
That's cool.
Yeah. And I could see like you're one of our troop leaders. Like you are helping us build that out. And
That.
in your work, like this, it's that seems like a large task. These are private organizations. Maybe some, right? Some people might care. Some people might care about environment. Do they care about justice? Do they care about inequality? We don't know. So, what would you tell? Is there some like framework you tend to share with maybe your clients or the people you're working with, or even just like your advocacy in general about how somebody who's not focused on environmental justice can start thinking about their work? So that could even be like an example of something that they should do or a way that they can change their practices to be more just.
I mean, you hit it on the head, right? Like I spent the first part of my career, I guess almost maybe 10 or 15 years in private industry. So I worked
Mm-hmm.
for big chemical companies, uh,
Mm-hmm.
that in many ways are seen as the enemy. I
Mm-hmm.
work for manufacturing, auto manufacturing. So I guess I feel very comfortable having conversations with folks where their mindset is about the bottom line. It's about how many things, widgets we're producing, and how we're going to get those widgets out in the best way possible. So I spent the first part of my career convincing many people that cared nothing about the environment. And this was probably like, again, 20 or 30 years ago when the environment really was not sexy, like why we should do things differently within our plant, within our facility, and why it makes a difference in how we manage our waste and why we can't just throw it in the river behind the plant. So that was a lot of my life. So I feel like I can be a spokesperson, I can be a legitimate uh, I would say influencer in that space, because I've been there and I know the conversations that I had to have. I know the tears that I had to shed trying to convince people like it doesn't cost anything to be right. So this is a lot of the conversations that I'm having now because we are in a different world. There has been, some literature around corporate and social responsibility and sustainability and resilience and, a little bit of literature around environmental justice in corporate America. And that is what I want to build out, because we need to go beyond sustainability. We need to go beyond resilience. And we need to talk about what environmental justice means or could mean in a corporate space. And so I'm not going to sit up here and say that I got the framework and the answers for any and every company, because that would be silly. But what I want to do is spend an appreciable amount of time having conversations with folks within these corporations that have the power and, maybe the wherewithal to say, hey, well, let's at least have a discussion. Let me tell you why we haven't thought about environmental justice, or what is, why this isn't a part of our business case. And so my hope is to use what I learned from those conversations to create a framework, to create the reason why, companies should do this. They should engage. They should think about it differently. So my hope is to create that framework and to create it in a way that it's easy, that it's adaptable, that it's something that can be integrated into an existing process, procedure, or policy. Um, and in a way that, it really, what I want to just show people is that the the cost of not doing EJ is more than the cost of doing EJ. And I mean, that begins with education, because I would imagine, again, that a lot of companies and corporations don't have no idea what environmental justice is. So I think there is an educational opportunity at this point. My hope is to have these conversations with different types of business folks and, really try and develop something that is practical and useful. So yes, for companies out there that, would love to have a conversation, are thinking about this or not thinking about it or scared to think about it, those are the folks that I want to talk to.
So we have just a few minutes. So last two questions. One is, in just a few sentences, you mentioned that the cost of EJ, environmental justice, is, you just said it. It's like it's worse when if it's more than like the cost. It's more if you don't account for environmental justice than if you did. And do you mean like the actual like monetary amount? And if so, like what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so basically, what I'm trying to say is if you don't think about, as a company with a footprint that has probably, a footprint in many different communities, if you don't think about how you operate, when you operate, how you have relationship with the community that you're in, it can not only be like a dollars and cents cost in terms of, for example, you have some communities that basically say, hey, we're going to protest what you're doing, and that can impact production. Therefore, you can't do what you need to do as a company. So it's the actual cost to the business, but it's also reputational cost. I mean, if you're known as a bad actor, if you're known as a company that, has been polluting and don't care, that is a reputational risk. So the cost that can be incurred with ignoring environmental justice for me is more than the cost it would take to invest in relationships, to do things the right way, to manage your waste, to build, again, those relationships that are critical so you don't have folks picketing outside your plant. So that's what I mean by the cost of doing it right, really are much less than the cost of maintaining the status quo.
So
So well
Bernice
put.
and Mustafa,
Thank
from the
you.
bottom of my heart, thank you.
And
Thank you for bringing
last,
that into this
can you
room,
leave us
into
with
this
how
space.
can we
Couldn't have done it
support
better.
you in the fight for a more
Still
equal
trying to
planet?
digest that. So,
Listen, I think the most important thing now is that folks don't step back, that you continue doing what you're doing, hold fast to your morals, your values, encourage folks within your institutions, whether it be academic, corporate, nonprofits, to continue to support any work that advances justice and equity, even if you can't say it. So this is not the time to back down. And so I just want to encourage people to be strong. It's time to get over grief and it's time to take action.
Such a pleasure to have you here. I'm going to stop recording. Thank you so much.
This episode was co-produced by my friend Kai Tran. I'm deeply grateful to everyone who made this podcast possible. Special thanks to Devin Henry and my parents, Sri Srinivasan and Rupani Krishnan, and my twin brother Krishna for their help. My podcasting professor, Allison Jones, made truly invaluable contributions to the creation of this podcast. I also learned invaluable audio skills from workshops at Duke's DeWitt Wallace Center, led by Professors Barry Yeoman and Stephen Buckley, and NPR's Emily Fang. Thank you all for your wisdom and support. And finally, a huge thank you to Dr. J, who made time for our conversation between meetings and community events. If you'd like to join our team or send in suggestions, fill out the form in the show notes or reach out to DMS137@duke.edu. Thank you.